I'm good. I think we all are just ready to be out, but we want to do it safely. And, we're still organizing and everybody's wanting to know when they can go start knocking on doors. And I keep saying, not yet, not yet.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm definitely wanting to open up again and making sure we don't have to do it in a way that we have to close again.
And that's exactly right. That's it. And that's why we want to do it safely. Our headquarters the building is still closed, but the work still goes on 24/7. So.
Well, it's really good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you for doing this today.
No,
hi, Leah. How are you?
I'm good. This is a first. I have not met you yet, but you have surprisingly met my mother, which normally does not happen. So I told her I was going to do this, and she's like, oh my gosh, I've met MJ. And I was like, how have you met her and I haven't?
When did you meet her? You
met her in Sweetwater, Texas, of all places.
That's likely. I've been all over this state.
My mom said it was over a year ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, they've got that WASP museum. Thank you. And she's
right.
like, I think it was that, but.
Yeah. That's right. I remember that. My husband insisted we take a detour. It was a long day, but he was like, you'll never forgive yourself if you don't go.
It's wonderful. It's one of the few great things about Sweetwater.
That was great.
On that note, I'm going to start broadcasting in 3, 2, 1, and then we will get going.
All right.
3, 2, 1.
Well, hello. We're live again. This is Deb Peoples, your Tarrant County Democratic Party chair, bringing you back to a very, very important event, and one that we have scheduled so that you get to know all of our candidates. As you know, we have been doing a series of virtual town halls. Not only have we talked with Vance Keys, our candidate for sheriff, but we've also talked with our party leaders about what's going on with voting and absentee voting. But tonight, it gives me great pleasure to bring someone and let you get to meet someone whom I have long admired. But before I do that, there's someone else that I have long admired, and that's our MC for tonight, Leah Dean. And I think you all know, if you don't, Leah is one of those millennial dog moms who manages to do it all. And when she's not dealing with her dog babies, she is doing what is also near and dear to her heart, and that's the work to elect great Democrats up and down the ballot. She has served not only with the Texas Democratic Women as vice president of their caucus, but she's also been president of the local Democratic Women. And if that's not enough, she's done the work as a precinct chair. She works with Planned Parenthood because she believes everybody should have the right to safe and effective health care. And so tonight, I am so pleased to introduce, before we introduce MJ, our DJ for the evening, MC Leah Dean.
Thanks, Deborah. It's good to be here.
Good. So, are you going to introduce MJ?
I think that's on you.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm a real fan girl. So let me just tell you, our candidate tonight is an amazing woman who is not only a mom, as you'll be able to see when you get to meet her, and a wife, but an extraordinary human being who served not only in our military service, but who put herself out there as a candidate to help us change Texas and to turn Texas blue. I know that you all some of you have met her. She came for our Wild Women's Luncheon series about a year ago. Just an extraordinary human being. It's someone that I am so proud to know and so wonderful to call a friend. I mean, she's a published author. She wrote a book called Shoot Like a Girl that describes her service for our country in Afghanistan. And she also had to sue the Air Force to remove the combat exclusion policy. And so for us women who want to give back to our country, that was very, very important. And so I've talked a lot, but I want you to meet this extraordinary woman tonight. And so it is my pleasure to introduce the candidate for the United States Senate, MJ Hegar.
Thank you so much, Deb. It is so exciting. We got started a little bit late because we fangirl each other so much. I just love you, Deb. And Leah, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you both for doing this. Really appreciate it. Leah was just telling me how I met her mom in Sweetwater last year. And I was like, yep, that sounds about right. Because we have driven tens of thousands of miles across this state, y'all, for a year. And thank goodness we did, because we put a ton of grassroots investment into this race, and it's paying off now. But first, let me just say thank you for joining us tonight. I know that you guys have a lot on your plate, just like everybody does right now. I may be talking to folks who are teachers who are worried about their kiddos. I know I'm talking to frontline essential workers, whether you're healthcare or food handling or anything like that, keeping us going, worried about getting sick and bringing something home to your family. I'm sure I'm talking to veterans who, have served our country and maybe currently are still serving and are as distressed as I am, and know that we took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And, 20 years ago, we used to joke about that domestic threat to the Constitution. Like, what is that, Canada invading? We understand that now. I don't think anybody jokes that they don't understand what a domestic threat to our Constitution looks like. So, despite our plates being full, despite our, minds trying to get wrapped around all of the things and all of the work that needs to be done, all the things that we need to fix, I really appreciate y'all not taking your eye off the ball here. That's really Cornyn's only hope, is that we get distracted and we lose momentum. We've done nothing but gain momentum throughout this crisis. And that's because of people like you. As a campaign, we are adapting. We have done so many online virtual events. It's good that we did those in-person events all over the state first and established that foundation. And now, a lot of those events, let's be honest, are people who are coming to meet the candidate or to have their voice heard or take a picture, but they're already supporting. But these virtual events, y'all, it's been awesome. It's a real opportunity, because we're reaching undecided voters who maybe wouldn't have committed their evening to get in the car and, put on their pants and, come out to an in-person event, and, buy drinks at a bar or something like that. But now it's no commitment. They just have to click on a link, give me a shot. They can ask a question or not. I don't have to look at them. They can be introverted. And we are just building an army that way. So we are going to be posting our strongest fundraising quarter yet. When a lot of campaigns are saying they can't raise because of COVID, well, we never really were the kind of campaign that was depending on those types of donations anyway. So when we had to cancel in-person events, or if high dollar donors, won't donate unless they, have a cup of coffee with you or something, that's fine, because our average online donation is $23. 90% of our donations come from under $100. And I am so proud that we have donations from over 3/4 of the counties across the state. So we just have a ton of grassroots support. That's what's going to propel us over the finish line here. And more importantly, there's so much work that needs to be done. But the good news is that there's work that can be done. So a lot of the issues that feel overwhelming that we're fighting for, and I don't want to preach to the choir on what those are. I'm sure we'll talk about them in the Q&A portion. The good news is that we know it needs to be done. These solutions are not that complex. The answers are more simple than DC will lead on that they are. They only become complex when you serve multiple masters. So if you are trying to look like you're serving your constituents, but you're actually serving your party head or your corporate donors, then yeah, it gets complex trying to keep all those plates spinning. But if you're just trying to fight for the people you represent, then it becomes really simple. So working down ballot is incredibly important to me. I ran a coordinated campaign last cycle that flipped 2 state house seats. We need 9 more. I believe we can do that. I believe there are a couple congressional seats we need to defend. I think we're going to pick up 3 more. I think we're going to flip the state house, break the Republican supermajority in the state Senate, and push 38 electoral votes up to our Democratic nominee for president. I got to tell you, there's no path to victory for this president if he loses Texas and California together. Now, California used to be red when Texas was blue. Then California went blue, Texas was red. Y'all, they're going to be blue together, and it's going to be because of the people on this call and people like you across the state. So I've talked enough. Let me just close by saying that in order to make sure every Texan has access to affordable health care, we can have aggressive action on climate change and an economy that works for people, we need to defeat Senator Cornyn and return this seat back to the people and work hard up and down ballot. We got a long 6 months ahead of us. It's going to go fast, though. It's going to be a lot of work, but I got to tell you, that hard work's just going to make the celebration that much sweeter. We got a lot to celebrate in November.
Well, thanks for leading us in, and we're so happy to have you. I know that Deb already fangirled over you, but I will just kind of follow up with, we're so glad to see you here. I know there are a lot of candidates that are doing a lot of online events, but we're glad that you decided to talk to us here in Tarrant County. Tarrant County is a really important county. We have a lot of votes here, we have a lot of people here, and we look forward to going blue in November. Isn't that right, Deb? Let's start off with what you talked about earlier with coronavirus and COVID-19.
Okay.
We know that after starting thousands of miles away in China late last year, COVID-19 has spread virtually to every continent. Around 70% of the globe is unprepared, and the US was woefully unprepared to respond to this public health emergency. There is an urgent need for action to defeat COVID-19 and prevent the next pandemic. I know my mom is 64, who you mentioned earlier, and is diabetic, and we really need to make sure that we take care of everyone in this country. So if elected as a US Senator, what steps would you take to protect our citizens and our economy?
So I have long been talking about, for years, the actions of this administration propped up by people like John Cornyn are alienating us from the rest of the world. So yes, we were unprepared for the pandemic, but it hurt us even more that we turned away help from the World Health Organization and that we see ourselves as separate from the rest of the global community. We're a global economy. It's a global century, and people are moving in and out of every country all over the world, and we need to be leading in the global economy, but also on the world stage. We have withdrawn and lost our influence at the UN. We are committing human rights violations on our southern border, which make us lose our reputation and our ability to lecture other countries on their human rights violations because it sounds hypocritical. It's a national security threat. It's a domestic threat to our Constitution. And specifically to answer this specific question, so not only was it that we were unprepared, but it's also the actions of this administration. Washington needs to make sure that our hospitals and frontline workers have every resource possible to fight this pandemic. And I hear nurses saying, we need this, we need that. I worked in healthcare for 5 years, y'all. There's probably nurses on this call now. The number one rule in healthcare is you listen to the nurses, okay? So it's really bothering me seeing them say, and not just nurses, but doctors and EMS and other frontline workers saying, we don't have the PPE that we need. And it's not just healthcare. We did a town hall with, food service and meat packers and transportation workers and other essential workers, the UFCW and the TWU, just to highlight the great work that essential workers across our country are doing and across our state. Now, we're not treating them like essential workers. We don't pay them like essential workers, and we don't, give them access to healthcare like they're essential workers, but we're working to fix that. So, we have to provide more testing. We're going back to business as usual in Texas, and we've tested less than 1% of the state. That's scary to me. My mom is older as well, and she had a stroke 1.5 years ago. I'm very concerned about her and her health, and I don't think that most people think that it's okay to sacrifice our older population for the economy. The economy, we will bounce back if we have the right leaders in place to lead us out of this. Right now, we don't have the right leaders in place to lead us out of this. We have leaders that are hyper-partisan, doing what's best for their party, answering the phone for their corporate donors first instead of for us. And we're not going to be able to come out of this strong if that's going to be the case. We need to be ensuring resources and support that have already been passed, the packages that have been passed, are getting to the people and the small businesses who need it. I am really worried about the accountability and transparency measures that have been walked back and attacked by the executive branch. So the bottom line is, as your senator, I'm going to fight against those things. I'm always going to fight for accountability and transparency. That's how I was able to build a broad bipartisan coalition of support from the right and left to open 238,000 jobs for women in the military, was by shining transparency on anybody who said they wouldn't meet with me because I wasn't donating enough or didn't have enough political capital or power. We can do this if we can end Citizens United and get corporate PAC money out of politics. And we just need to listen to experts, listen to science, listen to modeling. Don't be flippant about it and act like it's not a big deal just because doing that is somehow good for polling or good for your party. We just need leadership, y'all, and we need servant leadership, and we need people committed to our constituents.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of touch on what I wanted to ask you next, which is leadership. And, you know, I mean, I think we all got the robocalls a couple of days ago about, you know, from John Cornyn with his town hall discussion, which was, you know, the first I've heard from him since he's been elected.
Yeah.
And I've lived here my entire life, all 30 years of it.
He knows he's finally facing a real threat. So, yeah.
For sure. For sure. But that brings me to leadership, and being a candidate is difficult to begin with. Deb, running coordinated campaigns, obviously you know this. I've been a campaign manager before for an elected official in Midland. It's hard to campaign. Yeah. How do you think COVID-19 has changed the way that you're campaigning and reaching out to voters?
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, I alluded to it a little bit at the beginning. In the military, would we see a challenge or a hurdle, instead of just trying to overcome it, we try to turn it to our advantage. And I feel like that's what we're doing now. So it was important, and it continues to be important. It will be important again to get out everywhere and be everywhere. Texas is like 8 different states put together. And my advice when I'm mentoring down ballot candidates is always hyper localize your conversations. Don't go in someplace and start spewing talking points or spitting out headlines from the Washington Post. You got to be talking to people about the issues they're talking about around their kitchen table if you want to get elected. And, you know, we have very different conversations in El Paso than we do in Abilene, than we do in Houston. And, you know, that's really important. But we have turned this to our advantage. We are reaching those undecided voters that are more willing to click on a Zoom link than they are to come out to a happy hour. We are building you know, another thing you learn in the military is you plan for the worst case, you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst case. And we're planning on, in case this has to be virtual for the entire campaign, because they're going back too early. So we're probably gonna have to shut down again because of that, which by the way is gonna kill small businesses. And that's why I don't think we should be rushing to open as much as I want to open. So, you know, the digital organizing, please go to mjfortexas.com and click get involved and sign up for our digital organizing. We're doing a statewide digital virtual road trip, which has been a lot of fun. My suggestions to down ballot candidates is, as you're doing some virtual things, resist the temptation to go as broad as possible and reach as many people as possible. Continue to hyper localize. So that's what we're doing. We're doing medium to small size groups all across the state. We just did El Paso last night with Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, who just endorsed me. So much fun, learning so much, having great conversations, building great relationships. This is when grassroots foundation and volunteers and donors really show, they separate the viable campaigns from the ones that are going to putter out. And Cornyn, I think, was hoping that ours was going to putter out, and he couldn't be more wrong. People are very enthused about replacing him. He's showing a real lack of leadership. He's really hurting people. He continues with racist tropes and divisive rhetoric and name calling, and you know, he's just clearly not good for our state and for our country. So yeah, we have changed the way that we've been doing things. We're ready to get back into door knocking whenever it's safe for our volunteers and our staff. We continue pushing for vote by mail. It's absolutely ridiculous that we can't do that in Texas. We are the greatest state in the country. And if 34 other states can do vote by mail, we can in Texas too. Citing logistical concerns as a barrier to vote by mail is really disturbing to me, because the logistics around voting in person safely are going to be a nightmare compared to vote by mail. To be able to maintain social distancing, we had people waiting in 6-hour lines during the primary. To be able to shorten lines, increase access to machines and people working the polls, it's going to be a nightmare, in part because we are setting voter turnout records in Texas. So we're pushing hard for vote by mail. So there's a lot of things that I think, you know, COVID-19 has impacted. The last thing I'll say is there are 3 areas that the people on this call knew were a problem, but that maybe people who are lower information voters didn't know so much, but that COVID-19 is really magnifying. And that's our healthcare system, and the fact that we have the highest uninsured rate in the country, and how many people, nearly 1 out of 5 Texans not having insurance. the voter suppression with, the efforts to stop vote by mail, and people having to choose between their health and their constitutional right to participate in our democracy, and hyperpartisanship, this divisive rhetoric, this tearing down of legislation or legislative accomplishments because they belong to another administration without asking if it's going to hurt people or is it good for our country. This hyper partisanship, people are really tired of it. They're really pissed off. There's even people who are on the fence about women's reproductive rights who are pissed off that Texas leadership took the opportunity of COVID-19 to move the political football on something they've been unable to do legislatively, which is remove our right to choose and our reproductive healthcare rights. So people are really tired of that. So yeah, COVID-19 is impacting a lot of things, but we are taking everything in and overcoming and adapting and using everything we can to our advantage.
Yeah, which I'm so glad to hear as a small West Texas town girl, the majority of my life. I think that there are parts of COVID-19 campaigning that really benefit rural communities and people who are not well-bodied and able, or maybe have to work late or have more than one job or can't find childcare. I think this is giving a really great opportunity to get to see candidates in a way and interact with them that they haven't had to before. So a part of me hopes that things like this continue because it's really going to be beneficial to voters all across the state. I know there's a lot of people, a lot of my friends work more than one or two jobs, and they don't have time to go and hang out at a bar and meet candidates.
Exactly.
So I hope that this sticks around.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that quite a bit, that when we're able to go back to in-person events, we're not getting rid of these. So,
awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, because pants are optional, right?
Oh my gosh, my 5-year-old just like 3 days ago, it's kids, man, right? They say things sometimes and you're like, wow. I overheard him talking to his 3-year-old little brother and he said, "No pants, no problem." And that's become like our family motto somehow.
Yeah. I love it.
Sorry.
I love it.
A little Easter egg for you.
Yeah. No, I may not have children, but I relate to that in a very personal and professional manner. Well, something else I want to talk to you about that you mentioned is the uninsured rate in Texas.
Yeah.
I did not have health insurance until I was 22. My dad had cancer. My mom's a business owner and couldn't get that healthcare attached job benefit. So I know what it's like to be uninsured. I know what it's like to not have healthcare. So with that being said, Texas has some of the greatest healthcare research infrastructures in the world. And a strong system of schools of public health. The leadership, however, is nowhere to be found when it comes to insuring Texans or having the proper care. So what will you do whenever you're in office to kind of counterbalance out all of that and make sure that all Texans are covered and well taken care of?
Well, I mean, we definitely obviously need healthcare reform. So it kind of sounds like two different questions, like what are we going to do with health? How are we going to reform healthcare? And then how are we going to ensure that some of this great healthcare research, infrastructure, leadership is more involved? I think that our current representation already has a very disturbing lack of respect for science and experts and facts, truth, those things that we used to take for granted, I think. So we need to get back to that. We need to elect people that respect science and that understand that they don't have all the answers, and that maybe it's not a good idea to announce to the American people that they inject themselves with Lysol or whatever. So, we have to have a seat at the table for people who can actually come up with solutions. Right now, the people with seats at the table are people with favored status, yes men, big corporate donors, and things like that. And now we're seeing the results of that type of leadership. So, I think that we do need to protect the Affordable Care Act, protect pre-existing conditions on healthcare reform. Because, having good ideas and having a plan and having a vision are great, but people are hurting now. We need to make things more affordable. I had somebody say to me, this is part of why I'm so passionate about flipping the state house, is our lack of expansion of Medicaid. Somebody recently said, I have a kiddo who has a diagnosis that is really expensive and I can't afford care. So I had to quit my job to qualify for Medicaid. That's a problem. That's not what we should be incentivizing. We should be enabling people to work and be able to keep a food on the table and a roof over to work 3 jobs and without having to quit their job to qualify for a program that should be available to everyone. When I was facing getting laid off, when I was pregnant, which is a pre-existing condition, from my healthcare job, I naturally started thinking back through my healthcare journey, through my life. And the time in my life when I was taken care of the best was when I was under TRICARE. And that is basically military Medicare. And I want that for everybody. I want everybody to have access to that. I do think it's important that we protect people's right to choose for themselves and their family what that access to quality, affordable healthcare means for them, what that best access means for them. And I think a lot of times we talk about access in terms of financial access, but for those of us in rural areas, and I grew up in rural Texas too, we know that it's also physical access. So a lot of the, lack of Medicaid expansion, change in reporting that John Cornyn has been supporting, that's going to cost rural hospitals millions of dollars and make, the few that are out there shut down. Excuse me. We've got politicians attacking clinics that are providing life-saving care to people in areas that don't have access to care because they provide they provide abortion. So, I'm proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood and Emily's List and can we announce the most recent? I think we did announce the most recent one, right? Is anybody on my team? Well, we got endorsed by NARAL. We're really excited about that. These are really difficult endorsements to get. They take a long time and a lot of relationship building, but I don't want to get sidetracked on women's reproductive rights because of the questions about healthcare. So I'm going to fight for a public option because I want everybody to have access to Medicare. But I want to protect people's right to choose and to stay on their employer-provided healthcare if they choose to do that. But I don't want that employer-provided healthcare to be a barrier to quitting your job and starting a small business, or quitting your job and going back to school, or when you get laid off, or when, a pandemic comes through and we have record unemployment. That kind of highlights the problem with an employer-provided model. And I think that we need to just make sure, you talked about you heard from Cornyn and you haven't heard from him the whole time. One of the really funniest things that has happened, I think, recently is this big insurance PAC spent a lot of money advertising saying, call John Cornyn and tell him to support this legislation that pads their bottom line. And then he supported that legislation. And now that PAC is running ads saying, John Cornyn is not beholden to big insurance. So I think I guess it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic and so damaging to our democracy. But got to get that corporate money out. Got to get the insurance companies and big pharma, give up your seat, stand up, walk away, let the community, leaders and healthcare providers step forward and take those seats.
Yeah, completely agree. We've got a couple more questions, and then we're going to go to some live questions. We get some great questions in, but something that we need to talk about, not just as Democrats, MJ, you and I, but and Deb, but me as a young privileged white person needs to talk about is Ahmaud Arbery and what happened and what we all have found out about the past couple of days. We've seen obviously a rise in hate crimes with COVID-19, especially against Asian Americans. But what we're finding out now about what happened in February is unjust. It is not okay. And we need to talk about that. So I would love to hear your plan as a U.S. Senator on how you will help protect communities of color, people of color against hate, racism, everything that's happening, because my heart's been broken the last couple of days, as if it hasn't been bad enough here to begin with. So I would love to hear your take on protecting communities of color.
I am a silver linings person, and it can be so hard. Especially, I think a lot of us were very depressed in 2016, and that depression turned into anger and action. I'm a silver linings person, and I got to tell you, in 2015, 2012, we had a Black president. You would hear people say racism and gender discrimination and DOMA was shot down. So LGBTQ discrimination, like those are things in the past and we don't have problems with those things anymore. The silver lining of the disgusting time we live in right now is that nobody says that anymore. You don't hear anybody saying that we don't have a problem with those things. Clearly we do, and we have. And those things are not new with this administration. They've been there. And you cannot walk into a doctor's office and say, oh, I'm feeling fine, I have no symptoms, I'm good, and expect to be treated. So I'm at least happy that there's no hiding from this now, and that we can take action, and we need to. There's legislative action that we can take. We have to remove the bad and replace it with good. It's not good enough to remove the bad, but the bad is, I mean, Cornyn with his racist dog whistles and race baiting and tweeting articles about the birth rate of Latinos versus whites, as if that's something that should be alarming and brought to people's attention, which was right before the El Paso shooting, by the way. You know, talking about blaming China for the coronavirus and for viruses that didn't even originate in China. You know, his inability to support bipartisan immigration reform because he is answering the phone for his private detention center buddies whose profits are maximized by poor immigration policies. We just got to get rid of the bad first. And then I think we can do things legislatively to ensure that people have equality. But I think that it's important to partner with organizations to raise up voices to support candidates of color and of different cultures and different religions, and that are really representative of the melting pot of our country. And, you know, we just need to use our platform to elevate those voices and to bring those voices to the table and work within those communities and overcome stereotypes and racism where we can. We have to have a zero tolerance for anti-immigrant white nationalist ideology. It's a serious threat to our country and our safety and our identity as a country. So I will always stand up against hateful rhetoric. It has real consequences, and I will always call it out when I see it.
You know, I can't help but think, I'm not sure if you saw that Governor Abbott is releasing the salon owner from prison or from jail. And I can't help but think, what if that salon owner was Black? Would that be the same outcome? And I think about seeing the people who were protesting at the Capitol, a whole bunch of white people with their guns. If they were Black, what would that look like? We've seen protests from people of color, and we're seeing it from white people, and it's not the same response. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be standing up for communities of color. I feel like as a white woman, it's, you know, I need to use my voice and my privilege to stand up for them. And stand with them and give them their space. So I'm glad to hear that you'll also be doing the same thing. It's really important, which brings me to immigration. Mm-hmm. Immigration and dreamers are so important to this country. And I grew up with a lot of dreamers, being in West Texas, you know, and I grew up in a school where a lot of the people that were there were undocumented, and they were terrified of their parents not being home whenever they came home from school. So what policies do you support with regards to asylum seekers at our borders? And what policies would you implement to have fair immigration reform?
So I mentioned a little bit about our position on the global stage. I really do think it's a national security threat and morally reprehensible what we're doing with our immigration system. We need comprehensive immigration reform that's more in line with the American values that we tell the world we hold and that we are founded on. We tell the world we are the beacon of freedom and hope and democracy and equality and opportunity. When you become president of our country, you are automatically coronated the leader of the free world. That is something I think we are about to lose. So, you know, our immigration policy is a huge part of this. And during my many trips to the border, I've talked with people who are on the front lines of this, of the asylum seeking crisis, the humanitarian crisis. It is not a security crisis. And through those conversations, understanding that Texas is made so much stronger because of the contributions of our immigrant communities, and that we need to start honoring those contributions and treating people with dignity instead of letting politicians like Cornyn spread race-baiting, you know, dangerous rhetoric. The reason he has fought against bipartisan immigration reform is to pad his private detention centers, and because he is racist. I mean, every time he has an opportunity to show us who he is, he shows us racism. So it's time to roll up our sleeves and collaborate with our border communities and businesses and labor to pass comprehensive immigration reform that includes a pathway to citizenship, protecting dreamers, permanently ending child separation, full stop. I don't think enough attention was paid to the fact that the administration completely admitted that the family separation policy was a deterrent. That is a government using torture and terrorism to try to influence the actions of people. That is not American. It is unacceptable. It's disgusting and dangerous, and I won't allow it. So we have to permanently end child separation. We have to secure the border with effective procedures and technology, not a wall. That is not effective. We don't talk enough about the guns that go south of our border. We talk a lot about them coming into our country as if we're a great country and other countries can only taint us somehow. We have a serious problem with trafficking a quarter of a million weapons south of our border that causes a violence epidemic where somewhere between 70-80% of all the violence is caused by American made and bought weapons, which causes a humanitarian crisis. So you've got Cornyn, who takes money from the gun lobby and legislates it in a way that maximizes their profit margin. And then he gets money on the other side of it too, from the private prisons and the private detention centers. So he's just not incentivized to give us immigration reform or gun safety legislation. And that's the corroding effect of corporate money in politics. The wall is not that popular in Texas, especially when we start framing it like this. And I would recommend you do the same if this sounds, impactful to you. It has been very effective for me on the road when I'm talking to undecided voters who want to keep their families safe and don't want to seem like they're being racist and are scared. And they're scared because of the race-baiting rhetoric and acting like, it's not the 0.1% of people coming to this country that are criminals. Don't quote me on that. I'm being obtuse a little bit, but I'm just saying it's a very small percentage of people coming to this country committing crime. It's a vast majority are asylum seekers who are fleeing violence and looking for a better life for their families. So the wall is unpopular for several reasons. One, when I start kind of pointing out that the wall is a symbol of places like China and Berlin, and we don't want to add America to that list of regimes, then that's effective. It's effective to talk about how they're going to pay for it by robbing the military construction budget. And also, for a group of people who demonize socialism so much, the textbook definition of socialism is when the government seizes the means of production. And the means of production in Texas is land. And they are seizing land from Texas cattle ranchers and landowners that has been in their families for generations to give to the government to build this wall. So I'm going to fight for Texas families. I'm going to fight for our soul as a country. And immigration reform is absolutely key to that.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for about one more question. If you don't mind, I'm going to grab a live question because I think that'll be fun.
No, already? Oh my gosh, time has totally flown.
I feel like we just started, but I think it's all that fangirling, and I'm kidding. We actually started on time. So one of the live questions was from, let's see here. Who is this person's name? Let me go back there and find it. Can't find it, but that's okay. Let's talk about Tarrant County and how you are going to work with other organizations here in Tarrant County. We've got great organizations like the Tarrant County Democratic Women's Club that's been here for 90 plus years. We've got Indivisible Grapevine, Southwest Tarrant County Democrats. There are so many organizations, Cowtown, all these things. Talk to us about how you're going to really dig into that grassroots organizing that you mentioned earlier, and make sure that Tarrant County voices and concerns are heard and met and spread out through Tarrant County to make sure that we go blue in November.
We're going to keep doing what has made us so successful so far, but we're just going to do more of it, especially as we get into this last 6 months of the campaign. We're going to utilize the digital organizing now, more so even than obviously than it would have it without COVID-19. COVID-19 forced us into this world, and we're like we talked about it before, we're not going to let go of that. I need everybody who's watching to jump on board. And that looks different for everybody. We have an average online donation of $23. If you can throw us $5, $23, $100, something like that, that's a huge help. We need you to go to the website and click get involved and sign up. And you know, the literal question is, how am I going to tap into Tarrant County and those organizations? Is we're just going to keep working with y'all. We're going to keep the relationship open. We are not going to take people for granted. I think that sometimes when people run for office, I'm really not pointing fingers at anybody. I'm just saying that sometimes at different levels, people running for office have a sense of entitlement that you should just work for them. And we don't do that. We know that if we're going to win this race, we have to win over independent voters. We have to really engage the folks on this call and people like you across the state to really enthuse and do more than vote, which voting is a lot, but do more than vote, you know, and that is to give people a reason to vote and give people a reason to volunteer. And you do that by not taking the easy road, by doing the hard work, by showing up to events like this, by answering questions, by staying engaged and being available and accessible, and not just coming around when you need something. We got a lot of labor endorsements because we were told, you know, you guys don't just come around when you need an endorsement. And that's really important. These relationships are not just to get me elected. These relationships are to work down ballot, but also the future elections, having a bench strength of candidates, teaching people in Texas how to integrate some of the more recent best practices from some of our more successful states. You know, it's really, everybody's just got to put an oar in the water and start pulling in the same direction. And man, y'all, we are going to move mountains if we can just do that. So, you know, thank you so much. I know that this is our last question. Let me just kind of cap off the whole thing by saying thank you so much to Deb and Leah for hosting and moderating and all the work that goes into putting something like this together, and for future events and for past events that we've worked together on. And it's not just about this election cycle. It's not even really just about election cycles, period. But I intend to be working closely with you guys after we win, because our constituent services is going to be really strong. I cannot effectively legislate without your voices, without your ideas, your solutions, without y'all pointing out to me the unintended consequences of sometimes well-intended legislation. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. If you don't have relationships with people in the community, if you stay in an ivory tower like John Cornyn does, if you stay in a bubble, isolated and alienated, surrounded with yes men, you lose touch with the values of the people you're representing. And you could be doing something you think is in their best interest, and they could be screaming that you're accidentally hurting them, and you wouldn't know it if they don't have a seat at your table. So I just need you guys to stay engaged with me. I promise I'm not gonna let you down. We're gonna hold up our end of the bargain. We're gonna work our asses off. We're going to kick this guy's ass, and we're going to deliver some strong results up and down ballot. But I can't do it without you. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to chat with you. I am sure there are a lot of questions that didn't get answered. And I'm sure that there are a lot of inputs and, hey, did you think about this solution? Or I didn't hear you talk about this. I think we're going to be sending around a survey. So please fill that out and just stay engaged with our campaign. I look forward to you guys joining the team.
Yeah, and you know, we'll do it again, right? More questions, Let's do it again. It's fine. We'll get together. I'll bring wine next time. It'll be much more fun. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you for allowing me to help facilitate this conversation. Again, for those of you who have joined us, thank you for spending your evening with us. And don't forget to go to mjfortexas.com. Check out her issues on her website. Check out her endorsements on her website. Always you can give money, and we look forward to seeing you for our next candidate conversation. Deb, is it dinner time?
Yeah, it's almost dinner time. I just want to thank everybody for being here. These are trying times, and we are working hard to change the face of Texas. And so, MJ, we are so grateful you are in that fight with us. If I was getting texts as we were talking, your governor, not mine, y'all's governor today released a salon owner. And I agree with Leah, had she been a person of color, she would have been treated very differently. We know that we have a lot of work to do in Texas, and I'm committed to it. I know that everybody on this call is committed to it. We are grateful to you, MJ, for giving up part of your evening to be with us, to talk about your platform and how we're going to change the face of Texas. And we have news for everyone. We are totally changing the face of Tarrant County.
Well,
so, yeah, thank you.
Deborah, it wouldn't be a town hall with you and I if we didn't take a selfie. MJ, I am the selfie person. So are you ready? Everybody ready? Here we go.
Yes, we have to take our selfie.
Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank y'all so much. Enjoy your families. Enjoy your dinner. And MJ, best of luck.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Deb. Good night, y'all.
Good night.
Bye, friends.